Yes, we are in Brooklyn. We actually are very glad that we recently moved from a really tiny apartment in the Lower East Side to a bigger place in Brooklyn, which has been great to have more than one room now that we're
Yeah.
quarantined.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely, definitely. I mean, I just can't imagine if you were living in if you were a single person living in a studio, that must be really difficult. Fortunately for
Yeah.
all of us, we're not single and we're not in studios.
Yes. But I mean, Andy and I, my husband, we used to live in a studio like together for, I guess, a year. Was it like a year? Yeah, a year. And like, I mean, it's literally like 250 square feet. Like, I just can't imagine doing that now. You just can't escape each other at all.
Was that, it's funny because he's sitting like 2 feet away. Your eyes are darting to the left. But
No, we actually I mean, I feel like because we had that experience, like we don't really fight very often or like have a lot of awkward I mean, thankfully. So I feel like when we were in the studio, like it was never that big of a deal, but definitely the ability to like go out and take a walk or like go do errands helps. But I would say here, sometimes what's crazy, I mean, I feel like the crazy thing about living in New York, and especially like I'm an industrial designer, he's an architect, that when we first moved here, we were just like totally fine, just like scraping by in the smallest space we could because it's all we could afford. So when we moved to Brooklyn, the fact that we had multiple rooms and like I could be in one room and he's in another room and I can't actually see him was like such a luxury, which is so sad. Which is so sad. But yeah, no, I think very, very gratefully just are used to living in such a small space together that not too much has changed for us.
yeah, I don't think we ever lived in a studio. No, we didn't. But we lived in small places. And I think you're definitely right that when you're used to being that close, and after that, if you evolve to a larger space, there's not a lot of arguing or fighting because you're forced to like figure it all out in tight spaces because you have to. There's no escaping.
I mean, it's a good way to test a relationship, you know?
The ultimate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the case for a lot of people.
Now I wonder how many people are like gonna get engaged during quarantine or like break up during
divorce.
quarantine. They just like can't handle it. I don't know.
Yep. Engaged and divorced and then engaged again all in one, all in 6 months.
You just like can't do anything.
So then the product. So let's start kind of from the beginning. So you have a bachelor's in industrial design, correct?
Yeah, from Georgia Tech.
Right. And you had been working at Little Bits? No.
Yeah.
Little Bits.
So Little Bits.
Okay,
It's an educational toy company. So when I graduated I had kind of a funny journey. So I studied industrial design at Georgia Tech. And then kind of midway through my senior year, I like realized that industrial design is really, can be really wasteful. And like, I feel like a lot of architecture students go through this too, where it's like so much work in studio. And then when I graduated, I was like, oh, like, I don't really want to design like plastic garbage bins, like I don't want to like be in like SolidWorks, like monkey land for years before I get to do anything. So
wait, SolidWorks Monkey Land? What is
yes, SolidWorks Monkey Land. It's sort of like SolidWorks is like the common 3D modeling program for industrial design, like CAD. And it's like really common that just out of school, you'll just like, be 3D modeling injection molded parts for like some big company.
Okay.
It's like the equivalent of bathroom remodels, like you draw like bathroom plans when you graduate, right? That's okay.
Probably. Yeah, exactly. You're just like making drawings. And I was like, oh, like I really don't want to do that because back then I was really interested in sustainability, and it was kind of like for millennials, like the first wave of environmentalism after, as cliche as it is, after The Inconvenient Truth came out from Al Gore, like the documentary, like we all watched it and was like, oh great, I'm just making garbage basically. Like, and of course that was like right after I graduated, and I was pretty picky. Like I didn't really want to work for any company that I found. Luckily I was still living in Atlanta then, and it's like really cheap to live there and just freelance. And it wasn't until I saw Little Bits, which was an educational kids product startup that was just starting, that I was like, oh, like I think I could work for a company that was really mission driven and like mission driven companies like weren't as much of a thing 10 years ago as they are now. So that was like my first job out of school. I like applied and moved to New York within like a couple months.
So when you joined them, how long had they been around? They were pretty new.
Yeah, they had only been around for a few months, I think. I was technically like the third employee, and I was there for almost 7 years. And by the time I left, it was like over 100 employees.
Wow.
Holy smokes. So I think there's something very interesting about joining a company at the very beginning and potentially very educational for the employees. But I am curious, did you always know that industrial design was going to be of a great interest to you? Because for me, actually, that's what I wanted to do throughout. You
missed it.
Well, at first I wanted to be a fireman, but then once you
right,
totally unrealistic
joke.
But God, but
it's never too late.
Yeah, right. But once I started thinking more seriously about what I wanted to do in high school, when you have to be thinking about what colleges you're going to apply to and stuff like this. Like industrial design always was a draw. I don't know why I had this fantasy or this desire rather to design toasters. For you, was industrial design always, a primary interest?
Yeah, it actually started when I was in like middle school and high school. I really loved painting. So like I painted a lot and drew all the time and was like president of the art club. Like I was like that person. And I'm first generation Guyanese. So my parents are like descendants from India, from a country in South America. And they were terrified by that. the idea that like their daughter would go to like art school was just like it just wasn't an option. And I don't really blame them. It's because, they're they want to set you up for success. And like, they just envisioned me on this course of being like a starving artist, which they didn't want for me. Yep. I literally have 3 older sisters who all work in medicine. So I'm the youngest. So I was literally the one who was like, I'm going to be a painter. And they were like, no. But it did push me because in school, I think I was pretty frustrated because I was really good at arts, but I was also good at sciences. Like I enjoyed math and I enjoyed science, and I was trying to find something that was kind of in between. And like when I look back at high school, like, I mean, there wasn't like graphic design classes or like there wasn't anything design related. You kind of think that you have to be an artist or you have to like be working in a scientific lab, which is just not true. Like it's not a dichotomy like that. So I literally Googled like in my like senior year of high school, like careers in art and science, and like found industrial design and was like, oh, that sounds like interesting. And and then I applied to colleges. I just needed to find something that would like get me to the next step. I don't think I knew it was going to be like something that I loved so much, but I knew that I wanted something that was like a little right brain and a little left brain.
Right. And I feel like industrial design as the profession is pretty broad. And you can end up going in many different routes. And certainly one of those is, as you described, like being stuck in model space, just producing stuff for whatever company. And there's not a lot of creativity perhaps involved, and even for sure not a lot of direction, like you were describing, the companies that have a mission, right? A very clear mission. So you joined Little Bits. You were there for 6 years, something like that?
Yeah, it was like 6.5, I think, technically.
Round it up to 7.
Yeah, and so I think it was like 6 in like 6 months or something. Yeah.
In 2 days.
In 2 days.
So you started there when the company was very, very small, and then you left and you said there were like 100 people. What was your role when you joined the company, and how did you evolve in that company, like growing so much?
Yeah. So when I started, I was like a junior. Well, first I was an industrial design intern, and then I was like a junior industrial designer, and I literally just kept evolving with the company. And then when I left, I was like the senior director of product design, and I led and managed like a team of 10 designers that worked on the new products that we made. And I think it was kind of a combination of like being there at the right time and just like being like pretty like ambitious and like ready for more stuff. So every time we had a new milestone in the company, I would just always ask for like more responsibilities. I'd be like, I want to do that. Like, I can do that. I want to do this. So I would just ask for a lot. And then through that, I really learned like how you go from an idea to like planning it out to taking it to design to like producing it to getting it into retail. Like I kind of learned like the whole process from being there for so long. And it's definitely like something that I wouldn't have been able to do if I wasn't there so early.
Right. That's really fascinating because I think there's a lot of people around our age who are fairly career driven and they're trying to think longer term and decide where to go, when to leave, where to join. And it just, we've known a few people like yourself that have started at a company at the very beginning. And if the company is properly run and it's good people and all that, there's like a lot of things that have to happen for it to be a great place.
Yeah.
But if all those things are in the melting pot and you join at the beginning, I mean, that's a very rare education to get, like super rare.
Yeah, exactly. Like I always joke with people that it was kind of like my master's in like design and my MBA because I only have a bachelor's and like I just like got paid to learn it, which is even better. Yeah.
So, but the interest in sustainability and the concern for the environment was something that, it was on the kind of in the back of your mind or the forefront for quite some time, even before joining Little Bits. Yeah. And it's funny you mention The Inconvenient Truth because I enjoyed that movie. I thought it was well done and conveyed, but a lot of people didn't like it. Not as an aside. It's the truth. Well, I think people didn't like it because it was too personal to Al Gore. But for me, at least, I was like, "But that's also what sells it. Like this is about how one individual can feel connected to the world. So it's important for him to talk about his personal." That's my Yeah, go ahead.
No, totally. And like I taught a like environmental studies class at the New Jersey Institute of Technology in the design program, which was really exciting. And there are these waves of like environmentalism. And I think like back in I guess that was the early 2000s, probably when it came out, like 2005 or something. But like back when that first came out, like greenwashing and like the idea that environmentalism could be used in a way to be more mission driven, like wasn't widely accepted yet. And I think people were pretty skeptical about it. Right. And what's kind of scary is that like climate science has been around for a long time, but it hasn't been very mainstream except for like the past 5 years, probably.
Yeah.
So I think now like companies embracing sustainability and like there's so many nonprofits popping up around like climate justice and sustainability, which is awesome, but it's all so recent. So like Al Gore was way ahead of it.
Yeah. No.
He was so ahead of it. And I think some people like I'm definitely guilty of this too. Like I think so like there are celebrities and politicians who like use their platform to talk about it. And it can be kind of a turnoff because it's like branded Al Gore. But at the same time, like, what is he supposed to do? Like, he's Al Gore.
Yeah. No. I agree with all of that. I think, and also there's a level of sincerity with what he did and what he was saying. And I don't know what he's up to now these days, but at that time. So, I mean, I didn't have a problem with it. I think of course there are celebrities who kind of abuse their influence, let's call it, but I didn't get the feeling in that in particular situation. So
because we're talking about eco celebrities, I was like researching Leonardo DiCaprio has made like a bunch of documentaries and like he has a bunch of charities around this, and I was like googling like if he has talked to like how long he's been talking about it, because obviously he's been a movie star since he was like 10 or something. And there is this image floating around the internet of like an interview with him in like, I don't know, Tiger Beat or something, like a really old school magazine. And he was like 12 and he wrote about how he wanted like a solar powered car and like to save the whales. And I was like, oh my God, like he really has been thinking about that.
It was just perfect from day one.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, like respect that there's documentation that he's always kind of loved that.
Perhaps Leo can somehow become a partner of your business.
He has an apartment.
I would love that.
We'll let him know.
No, seriously, he has an apartment, I think, in Tribeca or Soho.
I'm sure he does.
And I think I had a friend who was into like sustainability, like really hardcore, and she was like, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna find his address and I'm gonna camp in front of his door and I'm gonna try and talk to him." And I'm like, "All right." So you could do that?
I don't know if that's a good idea.
No.
Yeah, no.
But it seems like I feel like if you're interested in sustainability in New York and design, I feel like New York might be kind of the right place to be in, weirdly.
In what sense?
Because I feel like there is a lot of innovative companies and people are super creative, like architects, designers, and there is a sensibility like living in a super dense city that you have to design a little more responsibly. And I mean, I don't know if you feel like maybe that helped you kind of move forward with your project in a way, being in New York versus being somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said too, even at Little Bits, like being a tech company that's not in Silicon Valley or like not in San Francisco, I think is super valuable because you just get a better diversity of not only people, but just the culture is very different. And I think what I love about doing design and sustainability in New York is that it's this intersection of like fashion, journalism, finance, architecture, design, different people. Like there's so much happening here that I think like the more diverse perspectives you have, the better outcomes and like the more innovative solutions you come up with. So I think especially like for sustainability being in New York, like being in an urban area, I think Marina, you're totally right. And I think one part that I've really appreciated is that like, because I mean, New York in a sense is kind of a bubble too, where a lot more people who live in, I'm sure I've read a study that people that live in cities tend to be more environmentally conscious just in general. And I think like this is kind of a weird example, but I've met so many environmental activists and like sustainability small business owners through Instagram. And like so many of them are in New York, and it could be a retail store, a nonprofit, an activist, a sustainable fashion brand, a sustainable like law office, and they're like all in New York. And I think it's because there's such a demand for that here. And like, if you can create a platform in New York, it's easier to scale it too, because there's so many people here.
Yeah. And there's for sure the business aspect. I mean, which is something about the kind of tech startup innovation industry that is fascinating to us, is that for a lot of people in that space, there seems to be, again, equal interest in the design and creative and mission side of things, and also the business. Like, I want to have a business that makes money and makes sense and works properly. And I have no desire to be a starving artist. It doesn't have the same kind of nostalgic draw that I think some other industries are kind of fall into. So when did the idea for Grouphug, which by the way, I do want to ask how you came up with the name, but when did the idea for Grouphug first really start to manifest or crystallize?
Yeah, what's funny, it's kind of it's a very like messy, non-linear story.
Yep.
So technically the name Grouphug I used for like an art activist like collective that I started in 2014. And it was a reaction against New York Design Week, actually. So I remember when Andy and I first moved to New York in like 2012, like I started going to New York Design Week. And when I was a student in Atlanta, I was like, wow, like New York Design Week, like this is so exciting. Like the best designers exhip like at these galleries. So I went to a bunch of shows and I was so disappointed.
Why?
I thought they were so lame. Like in 2000, I remember like going in 2013, and it was literally like pillows and like wallpaper and like candles, and I was like, "What is this?" Like I thought this was like the most innovative city place for design, and like this is the week. Like where's all the cool shit? And it just like didn't exist. It was a lot of furniture and lighting and like housewares and toasters and things like that. And I was like, oh, like this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. So from that, just like talking to friends and saying like, hey, like all we really need is to like rent a gallery and like put stuff in it, and then people will come to our show, like, of course, thinking it was that simple. So then after that, I formed this collective that I called Grouphug. It was like the Grouphug collective, and we just started producing our own New York Design Week shows around like a big impact theme. So we did a bunch of sorry, it's a messy story. We get to energy like in a second, but so it was kind of like a yearly project where like every year we would put out a call to action around some big theme. We did like nutrition, diversity. We actually did gun violence one year, which was really interesting. Like we would crowdsource themes that were relevant that year, and then we would get like submissions. We would pick the top 20, and then we would throw them in a gallery, like put up a website, and we would like have a big party every year, basically, and archive everything. And wow. it was really fun and interesting. And through that, we like got press, and like the parties just got like bigger and bigger every year, basically, until it was literally at a point where I think it was 2015 or 16, where I was sort of like, well, I'm like running Grouphug Collective, so like I'm just going to make the theme the environment this year because that's what I'm interested in. And like that year was so great. Like it was about like the environment and energy, and everyone's submissions were so interesting, and it was like so energizing for me to like be working on this thing that was like connecting all the dots, that I was just like, I just want to keep doing this about the environment. Like I think it's so like this intersection of design and impact, and like having like I think it is, to me, it's like this trifecta of like design, impact, and also doing it in a medium that like excites people. And that's kind of the piece that I'm really excited about, is like creating something that like excites people to learn more. Because I think, you know, for better or for worse, a lot of environmental topics, like especially renewable energy, they're huge and complicated and technical. And a lot of people, if you just like try to talk to them about solar panels, it's immediately like, just like flies right past them. So if you can do it in a way that's really interesting and like keep them on that topic, that is exciting to me. So the short answer is, it started off as like a gallery collective. And then after I hit like year 6 at Little Bits, I was like, okay, like I've made like dozens of products at this point. Like I'm going to try to do something on my own. And I just kind of picked up where we left off with Grouphug and like redirected it just about the environment.
Interesting. So how much time between that Grouphug gallery event that was focused on the environment, how much time between that and when you said, okay, all of these things that are inside me are going to manifest themselves as specifically a solar panel product?
Yeah. Probably like 2 years, honestly. Because I think we did, like, the way that the Grouphug shows were before, it was kind of like a 3 to 6 month thing, where it would be like, okay, like between December and May, we're going to produce this show. And then it was like over, and it was like back to like normal life.
Right.
So then we did the environmental show. And then actually after that show, we did another show just on female empowerment and like gender inclusivity, which was really interesting. And then I think it was the moment where we did that show. It was called Empower Me, about like gender inclusivity and diversity. And like we had the opening party, and like we had like, I don't know, like a couple hundred people like show up for the party. And I was like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm doing this, I'm like working during the day, and then I'm doing this thing on the side that is like really exciting. And I also feel like, I don't know, I feel like I reached a point where I was like, I'm kind of doing this side project, but like people are showing up and like they want to see more of it. And I was like, oh, like maybe I should actually focus on this more, because it's been this side project. And I actually remember like we had the gallery show, and like we just couldn't fit everybody in the gallery because it was this like really tiny hole in the wall gallery. And I remember someone being like, oh, why don't you have a bigger gallery? And I was like, do you not understand? Like,
give us money.
like, this isn't my job. Like, I'm just doing this. And then I was like, oh, what if I actually tried to do this? Like, maybe I should try. And then I think because I have the background in product design, like I guess, yeah, I don't know. It all kind of swirls around in my head right now because I feel like so much happens in like it's funny because I feel like starting your own thing, it feels like so much happens every day, but then at the same time, like nothing happens overnight, ever.
Yeah.
Right.
So all of these dots like have been planted, and it just it took me a while to realize that I could put them all together at least. So then I left the gallery, our last gallery show was in May of 2018. I quit my job in June of 2018.
Wow.
And then I definitely took some time. It was a long transition process out of Little Bits because I had like been there for so long. I had to write like 100-page like manual of like all these like all of this stuff that was just like literally in my head. I needed to like get it out. So that was, honestly, I'm grateful because that was like a very good process. Like I'm still friends with the CEO, and when I told her, I was like, I gotta go like do something else, and it was like very transparent and no bad blood at all. But then when I left, it's a very odd thing to like be in New York and like not have anything to do.
Yeah.
I feel like most New Yorkers, you're just so used to like commuting and going here and having meetings and like doing stuff that it was actually really fun like that summer to just like go do stuff in the middle of the day and like not have anything to do. Like I went to like, I like did all of my doctor's appointments, like, you know, stuff, stuff like that. I just like walked around and then it took me, I knew I wanted to do something in sustainability when I left. I actually didn't know it was going to be solar energy at the time. I knew like, I actually like interviewed a ton of people. I created a survey. I mean, the fun thing about being in New York and not having anything to do is just like, I had coffee with like every person ever. I was just like, hey, like I've got a bunch of time. Like, do you want to meet for a drink? Do you want to get a coffee? Do you want to do this? And just like met up with people and just talked to them about their views on sustainability and like what they were feeling. And the question I would ask everyone was like, if you could do anything in sustainability, like if anything was possible, like what do you think you would do? And what was so interesting is a lot of people said solar panels. And they were like, well, if I could do anything, like, you know, I'd be solar powered everything and I would have a house and it would have solar panels on it. And I'd be like, oh, like what's stopping you now? And they would just be like, well, like, how would I do that? Like, I don't like, I don't own a house. Like I live in an apartment. Like I don't have this. Like I'd have to call my super, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, oh, that's really interesting. Because like technologically, like you don't need a roof to go solar. It's just that they only make rooftop solar panels. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, I think when you think of technology and sustainability, you think of energy and you think of solar, but I think for a lot of people don't think it's an option for them. So I kind of like, that was a sticky point that came up a lot. And I knew that there's a lot of like sustainable mission-driven companies now that make products, but I think a lot of them are like bamboo fork companies or like metal water bottle companies or like stainless steel straw companies, which there are so many now. And there's like so many.
Yeah, they're probably one of the simplest industrial design tasks there is, but yeah, there's a lot of those. I mean, it's good, a lot of them. But
yeah, which is good. But I was like, well, that's like not something unique that I could do. And I think I just like, I just kind of hooked onto solar and like thought about, this was back when we were in our like really tiny Lower East Side apartment. And I would just like literally sit in the living room and be like, well, like maybe I should, like, what would I do if I wanted a solar panel? Like I live in a city, like what would I want to charge? What would it look like? And I just started like trying to figure out how to make a solar panel basically. And I got to a point maybe in December of that year where I like had this like prototype of something. And I like hung it in our window and it worked. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I have a solar panel in my window and it can charge my phone. And it's like a really simple thing, but it excited me. And then that's where I like pushed myself to just see if anybody would buy it, basically. Before I sunk any money into it, I was like, okay, I'm going to make 10. So I made 10 of them. And actually I have one here. This is our
there it is.
window, our window solar charger. I usually have it hanging up in the window, but what excited me about the design is like, I think solar panels are usually very like utilitarian and like they serve a purpose. But I think, again, getting back to that like excitement, like how can you make somebody excited about getting a solar panel, and like use the great things about industrial design of making something intuitive and beautiful and all of those things, but do it to something that kind of do it to a field that kind of needs help with
love.
And like needs some love. So the real sort of, I feel like when I actually realized that this could be a real thing was I with a friend, we made 10 of them. They didn't look as nice as that because it was kind of all over the place. I remember I stayed up, and actually Andy helped me a lot in making the first 10. We like stayed up almost all night, like scraping them and like putting them together, like in literally on the floor of our apartment. I actually remember that night I accidentally drilled a hole through our kitchen table. Like just like, you know, it was really like studio. It were like, do this, like do this, like all this stuff happening. And I signed up for like a holiday. It was like a holiday fair at a WeWork actually, like an office holiday fair, like the last 2 weeks of December. And I just like got my prototypes and I like got a table and I just like stood there and people would walk up to me and I would have to like explain the thing that I made and like, would they buy it? And like, I actually sold them. Wow. And that's where I was like, oh, wow, people bought these. And I think that's really like for anyone that is interested in like starting a business or doing product design or anything, like it's so terrifying the first time you give someone something, or like the first time you have to explain what it is. And like, I just remember like doing such a bad job explaining it because you just don't know. You just like don't know what people will react to. And it's kind of a new category of solar. But that's when I was like, okay, like I sold 10. And then from there, I just kind of kept going. So then after that, we fixed some of the problems in the first 10. I made like 50 of them and then we sold those. We like set up a website. And then I did a Kickstarter campaign to see like I think I needed that like initial validation and confidence from doing that first few. That's definitely terrifying of like, imagine spending like, I mean, so many companies do this too. Imagine spending like hundreds of thousands of dollars in R&D and just like not knowing if anyone will buy it is like the worst.
So
like, that's so scary.
Did you have like a business plan before you started making the stand? Like, okay, phase 1, I'm making 10. If it works, I'm making 50. And you kind of like look at the picture a little further than like the initial steps, or it kind of evolved more organically?
No, it evolved very organically. I think when I first started, I wasn't really sure how big of a business it would be. I kind of just wanted to do something that like I really enjoyed doing that had some kind of impact of like getting people excited and like being educational and functional. And I think I was definitely a little burnt out from working at Little Bits and working at that, like the startup life of like, I just worked all the time and like had a ton of responsibilities and really long hours that I kind of just like wanted to do something that I could control, that like was something that like I built. So my only criteria was like, I'm at the beginning, I was like, well, I don't want to lose money. And I want to make sure that this like makes sense before I keep going. I feel like it wasn't until like I did the Kickstarter where like we hit our goal, we raised $70,000 to make our first run, that I was like, okay, like I think this could really work. And then I started building out a plan around it. But for the first like few months, like I was just doing stuff.
I mean, I think it's really fascinating that way of starting the journey, where you gave yourself, like, I think it's interesting that you left your job not knowing what you were going to do exactly. And maybe you knew it was going to be a product. Maybe you didn't even know that, but you for sure didn't know what the product was going to be. And that kind of like exploratory, almost kind of like a respite from the New York grind to kind of reflect and think about, wait, how am I going to do this? And then going out and interviewing a bunch of different people to get to kind of crowdsource information. It's a very interesting process to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just realized that I wasn't gonna I just wasn't gonna push myself to like try anything unless I had left, really, right. Because it was just so much. I mean, like depending on maybe what kind of full-time job you have, but like having a full-time job at a startup is already like more than a full-time job. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that like, I mean, I feel like everybody has dreams of like side hustles where you like work and then you come home and then you like have the energy to keep going. But just the reality is you just don't all the time. And I just knew like I wasn't going to do it unless I just had no other option.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you did the Kickstarter, which was incredibly successul, like 7 times the amount that you guys initially asked for.
7 times?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, very quickly, what was it like to launch the Kickstarter? Because I feel like maybe in the story, was that the first time where you were going to be you yourself, because you're so closely associated with the product, because you're promoting it, you're making it, and you're not just behind the scenes, so to speak, like you're in the videos and on TV and all these things. But so the Kickstarter, was that the first time that you were kind of out in public? And if so, was that a weird transition to make from, selling 10 at WeWork to now being
all over YouTube
on a public space like Kickstarter? Yeah,
it was definitely very terrifying. I feel like to this, it's funny because I think I think like taking these baby steps, like as you do more of them, it seems less scary when you look backwards. But at the time, like I don't think I slept like the night before the Kickstarter. Like I was so nervous, and it's really tough. And I remember like going through edits of the video and just like critiquing every second of it, of being like, oh, my voice sounds weird here, and like, what about here? And it's just like, I mean, I don't know if that's how you guys feel, if you do ever listen. Yeah. And it's just like, it's really tough, but I actually am grateful, because I think the more I do it, the less I care, actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the first time was like really scary, especially because you're putting it out there, and like there's a chance. Like I knew that I knew that Andy was going to buy one, and like I knew that my sister was going to buy one. But aside from selling like 10, you just like don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, for sure. Well, I have to say that as Kickstarter, I guess, what do they call them? Pitches go. The one that you guys put together was for sure one of the better ones I've seen. And I think that's also when you come from a design background, you have a pretty good eye, I feel like. And so that's always the fear. It's like, I don't want to look like one of those people that have this really lame Kickstarter. But it's really well done. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Did you have like a plan B? Like, okay, what if Kickstarter is a big fail? Like, what do I do next?
Yeah, I think like part of the reason why we set the goal at like 10,000 too was 10,000 was an amount that I felt like was reasonable, and we would be able to take that $10,000 and like, make a bigger batch. So I think it was actually internally, like once we hit 30,000, I was like, oh wow, now we can actually do like a bigger run in like a real manufacturing process with like a big factory. I think honestly, if we didn't hit our Kickstarter, I probably would have like talked to more people and like tried to figure out if there was a better feature set, if there was a different product within the same space that would like resonate more with people. But I don't think I would have kept going as much. I definitely would have revisited and seen what was happening,
but not give up.
No, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't have totally given up. I think, but I think it is good to like question everything you're doing. It's tough though, because that can be kind of paralyzing too. That's something I struggle with, of being like, you have to question everything and like be very conscious of everything, but you also have to keep going. And sometimes those two things don't go well together.
Oh, no, 100%. Yeah, I feel that daily, and when I'm making tea or making eggs, it's a struggle.
It's so tough. It's really tough. Yeah.
It's design education. I'm grateful for it, but it haunts you.
Yes. Yeah.
So also the tech industry or the innovation industry and the creation of products and the space that you're within is fascinating because there's the like you were working at a maker's, not working at, but doing your work at a makerspace prior to COVID-19. But throughout this process, were you getting support from, like, I don't know, other people in the industry, or were you part of an incubator or any of these other programs or anything like that?
Yeah, I've actually been involved in a couple of programs, and I think I have like Google alerts for like incubators and grants and anything related to that. So I just get emails all the time and just like apply to everything. I think especially because I'm a like solo founder, it is really tough to keep everything going. That I think incubators for me have been a nice way to like feel a part of teams, even though I'm like doing a lot of stuff alone. But I was, my first one actually was, I was a resident at the New York Hall of Science, which isn't quite an incubator, but it's a kids science museum in Queens. And what I loved about that is they were basically looking for artists and designers to come in and like experiment with stuff and like make an exhibit. Like you could just make any exhibit you wanted and it would be in the museum. So I actually don't know if we talked about this yet, but that was sort of my first solar panel experiment. Was we made a cat-shaped solar panel for them,
right?
For the museum, called Solar Cat, and it like meowed and like lit up. It was really fun, and that was a great sort of tester of like the idea that something at the intersection of design and solar is interesting, and like people are interested in that. And then I was actually a resident at Kickstarter too. So Kickstarter's headquarters are in Brooklyn.
Oh,
I had no idea.
Yes. And they do residencies for creators where it's kind of like a mutually beneficial, where they can like seed creators that they think their projects are interesting. We got to work like out of their office space. And then we also got to like talk to basically anyone that worked at Kickstarter for advice on our campaigns, which was great. So like when I was going through and like some of the logistical things within Kickstarter are kind of complicated, and like you have to get approvals before you submit your campaign and stuff like that. So that was really helpful.
Wait, so you had been a resident at Kickstarter before you launched the campaign?
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Very smart.
Yeah.
Very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly feel like that was just like really good timing. Like I got in, I applied for that. And then once I was accepted, I was like, oh, like, I guess I'm doing a Kickstarter. Like, I gotta keep going. Yeah.
So with these kinds of places, what's typically, what's traded? Obviously you get to work in a space and be around, there's that kind of the intellectual knowledge you get access to. Are they typically asking for what in return? Yeah,
I think, for those two programs, the New York Hall of Science, like they're giving you a platform and then they get an exhibit out of it, which is good for them. They get like fresh exhibits. And then for the Kickstarter, I think for them, it's more like a storytelling marketing kind of thing, where they have a program where they help creators do campaigns. And then obviously like anyone who was in the program kind of has inside knowledge to like do things to make their campaign more successful. And then Kickstarter gets paid every time a campaign is successful. So
sure.
they want more campaigns basically.
Right.
Yeah. I typically like any type of thing I apply for, like if grants are always great because it's like free money to support your work. And then in exchange, a lot of times it's like collaboration and events and stories and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So we have to ask then that you were on Shark Tank, which is it must have been very interesting.
Wait. So you exceeded your goal on Kickstarter, and then you went to Shark Tank.
Yes.
The day after.
So
kind of, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it all happened very fast. So I honestly, like, when I think back about last year, like, I like can't believe all the things that happened. It was kind of crazy. But yeah, so actually I just have to note that what's really creepy about New York or our neighborhood right now is that everything is closed, but for some reason there's an ice cream truck that still drives around.
That's super creepy.
So like, if you could hear it right now, it's like, it's total silence and then like an ice cream truck, and it's like a creepy apocalyptic horror movie.
Yeah, and the sound,
like
it does that weird morphing as it goes by, right?
Yes, it's so creepy.
Yeah.
So I just hear it going around, and
That's why you look a little freaked out. Okay.
it's creepy. But yeah, so the Shark Tank, a fun fact for anyone is that the Shark Tank producers actually look at crowdfunding campaign videos for casting.
Oh.
So they saw my video and like invited me to come on.
Whoa.
Wow.
Was Shark...
So I was like, sure.
Was that on your
'cause
radar? Were you like, oh, Shark Tank might be another...
No, it was, I mean, I watched the show, and like, I generally, just being in the like startup tech space, like I've definitely had watched it before, but it wasn't like on my checklist to apply, because I just wasn't, I honestly wasn't thinking about growing in that way. I was still kind of in the mindset of being like, I started this thing and like it's gaining some momentum, and like I'm not sure where it's going to go yet. But then obviously when you get like an email or a call like that, I was like, oh, like, wow. Sure. So I like went on, and it is a pretty long process. It's like a 6-month process basically to get on before it airs. So it literally was like a week after my campaign launched, like I got an email.
Whoa.
And I honestly think it is, there's a quote from this like entrepreneur in New York called Fred Wilson. He's like a pretty well-known venture capitalist in New York City. And he has a really great quote that I love, which is like, entrepreneurship is this mix of really hard work and luck. And he has a weekly email. Actually, I think you guys would like it if you subscribe. And he sent one the other day that said, like, you have to sort of work hard enough to be a business to like take advantage of the good timing and luck that you have. Because if you don't exist, then you're not going to have the timing. And I think that's definitely something for me that like, I just like kept going. And like, if I hadn't worked hard enough to like get the Kickstarter up, then the producers never would have saw me. But you just like have to be out there for people to see the opportunities. So like, I feel like in a way, entrepreneurship is like, you just have to keep going, and like the opportunities will come if you keep going. But if you give up, then the timing won't be there, which is always tough. But I think for Shark Tank, they called me. First of all, it's like 200 pages of paperwork, like no exaggeration. It's so much. But that's actually part of what convinced me to go on, because they took it really seriously. Like they wanted to know your plans. They wanted to know all of your business details. Like they do try to weed out people who are like not serious, which I appreciated. So like you couldn't an average person just couldn't apply and get on. Like you have to have all of your shit together basically. Because they obviously don't want any fraudulent businesses or scams or like people to go rogue. Like they want real businesses. And then, we filmed, I think it was the last week of September, the first week of October. So it took like a while just to get through the process. And then, I basically just flew out to LA and like pitched.
No big deal.
With my stuff, and
So how much more like preparation did you have to do when you first got that email and you decided and you read through the 200 pages? Because it's a whole production, right? You're in front of there's a nerves aspect. You're in front of these 6 or 5 people, but you have to have a stand, you have to have your product, you have to have a speech, you have to pick out wardrobe and all of those things.
I just tried to just like do it as level-headed as possible. So like even just being a really small business too, like I obviously I've heard of and met tons of companies who have spent like $20,000 like on their set. And I was like, well, I can't do that. So like, I'm just going to do something that like works for me. So like I made a bunch more panel prototypes. Like I got like a little thing made to hang it in. And then I didn't buy any new clothes. Like I just wore stuff that I had. And my mindset was like, if it happens, like it happens. If it doesn't happen, then it's fine. And I just like did it.
That's probably the best mindset to have. Some people on there seem awkwardly desperate. I would put it that way.
Yeah. And to me, I was like, this is such a cool opportunity to just talk about solar panels. Like, you know, like tons of people are just going to see solar panels in a different way. And I think that's awesome. And like, whether or not I get a deal, like is fine. Like it'll, whatever, like whatever happens will be fine. And like, I definitely don't want to, I mean, I watched, like Andy and I did watch, like I watched like every episode of Shark Tank just to like understand like all the personalities and like what was happening. And I think I wanted, if I was going to get a deal with anyone, I wanted a deal with Mark Cuban because he has the best sort of track record. He has, I have some friends who have actually been on the show like years and years ago, just through the startup network. And I like talked to them and like found out what their experience is. And like, I tried to figure out what it was like to work with Mark and things like that. And like, just everyone I talked to said he was such a great person to work with. And I think he also, I don't know if you guys watched the clip, but he also like has the best sort of instinct for investing more in people and more in like a category and less about what the sort of like exact financial return is. Kind of like I actually like Mr. Wonderful. I like his commentary. I think he's funny and smart, but like he tends to only invest in something if he can clearly see the return.
Sure.
And I think Mark tended to invest in like bigger picture things. So I was really happy that he offered me a deal.
I mean, especially with your product, because it's defined and has a final form right now, but it's clearly very highly flexible to evolve in almost whatever ways is going to help the business and whatever ways that it needs to also. Yeah. You know, exactly. And that's a remarkable thing.
Yeah, totally. Like I think that's an exciting thing about just solar in general. It's so modular, like you can basically put it anywhere, and that's like the design exercise. So that was something I tried to convey on the show of like, this is our first product, but like we could make anything. So if you're interested in solar, like this is what we're doing. And I think Mark definitely saw that. And he's been great to work with too.
So you show up in LA, you show up on set, and they have a bunch of people queued up at once. Are you seeing, I mean, take us a little bit behind the scenes. Are you seeing the other people that are about to go up? Are you like, tying the shoelaces together and be like, oh, sorry, you tripped?
Yes, I actually made a bunch of really good friends from being there. It's definitely a very unique experience. Like they put everybody up in the same hotel. So it's like one like nervous like hotel filled with like nervous people like muttering to themselves. Basically
not
like
sleeping,
like literally like not sleeping, just like practicing, like pacing. Like it's a very like nervous atmosphere for sure. I think we basically everybody is like shuttled together, like from the hotel, like to the studio lot. Like everybody is doing things together. So like I definitely met a ton of people who are going through the same situation, which was nice. And like some of them we still keep in touch, and like we've bought each other's products and stuff like that. Cool. But it's I mean, I think the waiting was probably the worst. It really like I practiced so much that I basically could say my pitch like in my sleep, like at any time. I just like practiced. And I think I'm really glad that I did, because I don't know how you guys feel about public speaking, but like sometimes if I'm giving a talk or anything, like if I don't have all of the words memorized and like some weird thing distracts me, like my brain can just like go blank. So I was like, I need to like have this like programmed into my brain so that if I get there and like I see something weird in the corner of my eye, I don't like shut down. And it definitely was like a test of just like mental capacity and like physical capacity, because when I was there, you're usually there for like 3 days. So I was in LA for like 3 days, and they have this crazy schedule of like, they basically shoot the whole season in like a couple weeks. Wow. And so everybody's like scheduled out, like which day you're supposed to go, and you're actually in pitching for like an hour. But they edit it to like 8 minutes or something.
That
so
is
it's also
crazy.
Yeah. So it's also much longer than it is. And like, yeah, I think I was maybe like 45 minutes, but like some people are in there for like an hour and a half, like depending on how it goes. So yeah, so it's long, and it's just like one of those things. Again, it kind of reminded me of being in studio in school, where like the night before, like the day before, like you're so nervous and you're practicing, and like, you know, like I also just like in a vain way, just like didn't want to eat a lot because I didn't want to like feel bloated because I was going to like be filmed for TV, you know, like all of those things. I was like drinking water and like eating salads, which I don't really enjoy salads normally. And then the thing that really like tested it for me was I prepared like the whole day before I was supposed to go. And then I think it was like a Thursday. I was supposed to go on a Thursday, and I got bumped. So I basically waited on set all day, all Thursday, like in my clothes and my makeup, like muttering in a tent with all other people muttering like to myself. And then I didn't go on Thursday night, and I was like, oh God, like I'm going to get cut from filming. And then they called me like Thursday night and said, if you can come at 6:30 Friday morning, we'll squeeze you in. And I was like, oh fuck. Like I've basically already not slept or eaten for a day, and now I need to do it again. You know? Now I need to do it again.
Yeah, the pacing was off.
Yeah, I was just like, oh God. So then I went back, like basically didn't sleep again, and then went back at like 6:00 in the morning, and then pitched, like shook Mark Cuban's hand, and then literally went to the airport because my flight was that day.
Wow. Oh my goodness. My goodness.
Sounds like a movie.
It was really tough. And like, I was so exhausted that like, if I hadn't memorized, like if I hadn't just like beaten that pitch into my brain, like, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
And then you fly back to New York and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah. And then you can't talk about it.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. It's just a dream.
It's just a dream. Like you can't talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, I guess, that the pitches and the conversation would last around an hour, because I think because they cut it down so much, and because it's a kind of a reality TV show and you have characters to some degree, you know, and I think, I don't know the people on there that well or at all, but I assume there's a little bit of amping up the characterization or the caricatureness of all of them. And so I think as a viewer, you kind of feel like this is not really reality. And I've always wondered, I assume the deals are real, but like, how legit is this? Because it seems to be done very quickly. But you know,
yeah, no, I mean, that's another thing that sold me on it too, is that the sharks and the judges don't know anything about you before you go on. They don't know your name, your company. They don't know your product. Like they have no idea who's showing up. So the conversations and the questions are all totally real.
Wow.
And I think the way that they film it is that like everybody has like a sort of pre-memorized like minute talking point. So like for me, I had like a minute or two of like something I had, like the pitch I had to say when I went on the stage. And then after that, it's just like a free for all. Like they just ask you anything. So like you just have to memorize all of your numbers and like all of your business numbers, and then they'll just ask you literally anything. And that's where, honestly, that's where it felt more like a conversation, where they'll just be like, oh, where are you from? Like, what does your product do? Like, can you show it to us? And that was actually more relaxing, because you just realize that they're 4 people and they're just asking you questions. Just that it's all recorded, and then they edit that together. But that part was a little less scary, to be honest, because it felt more like you were in a room with people and they just didn't know anything about you. So they were just asking questions. Like they don't have like premeditated responses. They just say stuff.
That's interesting. I mean, also when you viewed it, I guess the first time you view it is on air. You don't get a previewing, right?
No.
Yeah. So
I honestly haven't seen the whole thing.
What? You're too afraid, but there's no risk. It's already done. You've already won.
I know, but I just can't. I mean, it's like I just can't. I just don't want to see. I don't know. I just don't want to see myself. Yeah. Andy's giving me the eye because we had like a Zoom viewing party with my family and a bunch of friends, and it was like on in the background, and I was just like, okay, like let's just get this over with. Yeah.
Okay. Were the bits that you have seen, what was it like, seeing part of it? Did you feel like it was the experience was different from what they showed? Was it accurate? Did you completely blank out everything that happened?
Well, it's funny because my actual pitch, like I didn't really remember all of what I said because I was really tired and I was nervous, and like, it was just like all of these things like just happened all at once where I was like, I'm pretty sure that this person said this, but I'm not really sure because it was such like a weird rush of things. But no, from the parts I saw, I thought it was great. And I thought they edited it together great. I think there were definitely longer parts of the conversations that happened that like didn't make it into the final cut. Like I remember, I actually like Barbara Corcoran in the show like says that she thinks our product is really ugly. Fuck you. That's okay. Actually, it's been interesting because we've had a bunch of people reach out saying that like they think it's really pretty and like they don't know what she was talking about. So it's kind of it was kind of an interesting point for her to make because now we have people saying that it's like it made it a talking point, which is kind of helpful. But like she did say that, but we also like had a conversation about it. But in the final cut, it just comes off as like a point, you know. So there were pieces like that where like we had longer conversations about things that just like for the purpose of being short, they just cut it.
And then afterwards, after you're basking in the glory of hugging Mark Cuban, which I'm very curious what he smells like.
I don't remember.
Damn, we have to find someone else who hugged Mark Cuban. I expect he smells like money and cologne. No, so then afterwards, what happens afterwards? Like, how involved is he? I mean, are you on the phone with him every week? Are you working with his team?
Do you have like things you have to provide, like milestones, homework, like to make sure that you're staying on track? No, but there is a financial deal there, so he wants things on his hand, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So what actually was interesting for me to learn too is that after you shake hands on the show, like that's not a legal agreement. Obviously, like you have to go through a bunch of paperwork to finalize the deals. I'm kind of making up this statistic, but I think like more than maybe a quarter of the deals that you see on the show actually happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because after you shake hands, there's like a due diligence process where like the investment the shark will and their company will go through a process of like looking through all of your actual finances and your business documentation and like to make sure that they still want to do the investment. I've heard like bad stories about actually I think on like a podcast that I listened to when I was preparing where it was like interviewing Barbara and Mark, and they were like sometimes there's a handshake deal and then you look into the company and they have like $500,000 in debt and you're like never mind. So you just have to like do that homework. So we went through that process, which also took a few months. Like it just takes a really long time. It was like another 100 pages of paperwork. Wow. What I really appreciate about working with Mark is that he's very like no nonsense, like, and very reachable. So like I could literally just text him a question right now and he would answer, like within hours, which is like crazy because I think about that sometimes how like I struggle to clear my inbox, yet somehow he manages to always answer me. So I'm like, oh God, like,
How
what
does
am I
that
doing
even
wrong?
how does it even
What am I
work?
doing?
How does he do that? Right? Because if you think about the people
has
that
a
he's
clone.
invested in Shark Tank alone, like how do you even manage that? Yeah, he must be a robot. That's the only thing.
He just does it. And like in terms of what Marina was asking, like there are certain things that like it's very normal if someone invests in you, like quarterly or monthly financials and like things like that you have to share. I honestly, like, I remember going through the agreement and thinking like, this is great because now I like have an excuse to like get feedback on all of my financials. And like, this is awesome. Like I would love more feedback, especially being a solo entrepreneur. When after we did the handshake deal, there's obviously a lot of papers to sign where because I felt okay, like giving up a little more equity than I wanted to, because like I'm only one person and like I still have 75% of the company. But when all the Shark Tank companies, or I don't want to speak for all of his companies, but it's pretty normal to do like weekly email updates with Mark and his team, which is great. And he always responds, which is amazing. Where before we signed any papers, I asked him like for an in-person meeting that like we have to meet. And like, I want to tell you about all of my plans and like the finances and my goals. And like, I'd love your input. And he was like, sure. And he like came to my office in New York.
Fucking wild.
And I was like, wow, great. Like this, I trust that when I need help, he's going to respond and like try to help me. Or if I'm like making this grave error, like, and I ask him for feedback, that he's going to tell it to me straight. So I think that's been really invaluable. I honestly think like we're a little too early where like I'm like, this is a whole other podcast, but like now I'm in the position where we're trying to manufacture our first run during COVID, which has been very challenging. So it's just taking a really long time. So I think like it's been a little too early that I haven't really partnered with Mark on anything like too strategic, but I think having him there, like I'm sure once we get there, it'll be really valuable.
Yeah, so that's actually a good transition. So the product, the company and everything, where is it currently? Yeah, where is it currently?
Yeah, so right now we were supposed to be shipping our first run of this like window product. We got delayed because basically every factory shut down for like at least a month. So we're kind of at the whims of all of that. We're going to be shipping in June, which is very exciting. It's like day by day, like little things happen, which is awesome. And then we're developing bigger and different shaped panels. So I actually have, this is a herringbone panel that we're working on, which is really, really pretty. And like thinking of more like fashion forward and like kind of architecturally inspired patterns that we could do that are like adding to home decor or like figuring out different applications for that. We're also making bigger shaped solar panels. So like we made solar cat last year, and then we actually are making like a solar turtle for another science museum and like a solar heart for a retail store. So like carving out a niche for like designer solar and like funky shaped solar and just like seeing where it goes. So first step is like actually launch and ship our direct-to-consumer product, and then use that sort of as a catalyst to see what other opportunities there are.
And all these are created from the same module?
Yeah. So we actually, if I hold this up, so we actually like these pieces are like different solar cells. So like that's like the building block of a solar panel. So like a solar cell soldered with other cells like builds a panel. So we're basically like working with solar companies that make cells, and we're like cutting them and arranging them in unique ways.
You guys are cutting them? Yeah. You can do that?
Yeah.
It doesn't ruin like the integrity of the original panel.
Nope. Because it's basically like you get I don't know how to describe this. It's kind of like it's very modular. Like if you think honestly, like my career at Little Bits inspires me a lot in solar because you can just think of them all as like little pieces, but like imagine like you had a bucket of Legos. Like we're basically buying the cells from companies that like make the actual silicon material. And then we're basically cutting those and arranging them in different ways to build out a panel so that it's like functional. Like one cell on its own like doesn't really do anything. You have to put them together. And I think for most solar panels are made for residential companies. So like it doesn't really make sense for them to cut them and make weird shapes because people just want rectangles like in a grid. But for us, like if you're buying something for the decorative aspect too, then the shape matters.
So the little bamboo framed one that you were showing us, how long does it take for it to charge before it to like capture the sunlight before you can start using it for your phone, for example?
Yeah, so with this one, there's actually a rechargeable battery built into the frame. Okay. So you can basically hang it all the time. It'll take 8 to 10 hours for it to charge up the internal battery, and then you can actually plug directly into the frame to charge like your phone, watch, iPad at a normal rate. And
the requirements are having direct sunlight.
Yeah, direct sunlight. And we get questions a lot about like partial sunlight, and it will technically still charge even if it's a little cloudy, but it'll just take longer. So instead of it taking the 8 to 10 hours to charge in direct sunlight, it might take like 10 to 20.
But it's still possible then.
Oh yeah, it's still possible. Solar cells actually harvest energy from anything in the visible light spectrum. So unless it's like completely pitch dark, you're going to get something. It just depends on how long it'll take.
So even if you have an apartment that's facing the back of a building and you don't get too much direct sunlight, you can still manage to use it.
Yeah, and it'll just take longer. Yeah. Like there's a term for that where it might like trickle charge instead of charge at a normal rate. But I think that's part of why I think our products are exciting. It's like, but if you just like the way it looks and you just want to have it and it's backup power, then that's great. And it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, backup power it might be a good thing to pitch amidst the pandemic.
I know. I mean,
I don't know if you want to use that necessarily to sell things, but this is for the zombie apocalypse.
We'll see where it goes, but yeah. And I think for me, like having it be like for our first like early customers, like that first 50 people who have bought it, like keeping in touch with them and just seeing how, like, I think one of the best stories I've heard is that there's one woman in Brooklyn who bought one of our early ones, and she'll say like every time someone comes over, they ask me, what is that? And she talks about how it's a solar panel and like this is how it works and blah, 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 blah. And I think like that's awesome.
Yeah. And so right now the panels are available on Grouphug website.
Yep.
Are you
Grouphug?
Are you thinking? So it's available online. Once that whole pandemic is over and we're back to normal life, are you planning to have the panels accessible in stores or like physical places for people to see it and interact with them?
Yeah, I would love to. Actually, before the whole pandemic, I was talking to some like boutique retailers in New York, like just starting kind of small. And there's a bunch of like eco-minded, like sustainable and like gift stores that I think it would be a great fit in. And like there's a lot of like mom and pop owned like home decor stores too in New York. So yeah, starting off with stores like that, and then I could see this potentially being in like Urban Outfitters or like in
I was just going to say Urban Outfitters. Yeah, totally.
Well, and also maybe and not just New York, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
And then not just New York.
Right.
Yeah, I think for me, I just like starting off small. Like I think like the sort of experience I have of like having to sell 10 myself, like I think for the first stores, like I would want to go to the store and like see what's working and not working before we scaled. Cause I think that messaging and like packaging and like all of that is so important.
How much additional fundraising do you have to do now to stay afloat, cover bills and whatnot? Are you still having to hustle a lot on that end?
Yeah, I mean, I think because we're so scrappy and like there's not really anyone else full time working on Grouphug except for me. So I have I do have a number of contractors that help me part time in like really specific areas like electrical engineering or supply chain or things like that, like safety and compliance testing, which is a whole thing with electronic products.
Right.
Yeah, you can't just sell anything with a battery. You have to like go through this whole process. So honestly, right, as soon as COVID hit, like I had a bunch of other projects that I wanted to do, and like I immediately paused them because I was like, we need to save cash flow basically until we know what's going to happen. So my immediate goal is just to ride out COVID for the next few months. And like we're lucky because we can continue to take pre-orders and continue to sell that direct to consumer products. I am going to be doing a bunch of tests on like different e-commerce channels like Pinterest and Etsy, and like doing some paid advertising to do some tests and see how that converts. But I'm not currently actively fundraising. We're mostly just like conserving cash and like putting a bunch of efforts on sales to just keep cash flow coming in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I
mean, to me, what do I know? But that makes sense.
Yeah. Just like trying to spend as little as possible to get it off the ground. I think honestly, that's been one of the greatest things about doing the Kickstarter is that we can directly use that 70 grand just against producing that product, which it's nice because a lot of times with other physical hardware goods, if you don't know what your customer demand is, you can sink a lot of cash into it, not knowing how much you're going to sell. But we're basically producing a run of a product where we know that 500 are already sold. So it's a lot lower risk. So I would actually love to do another Kickstarter for our next product in the same way. And I think it's a good way to be smart about finances and just know like if a product is going to work or not.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would be successful. So if people wanted to, I mean, again, with COVID, but if businesses wanted to get a custom one of some kind, can they request that of you guys now?
Yeah, you can. So if you go to our website, grouphugtech.com, we have a little tab called Custom Solar, and there's like a little questionnaire to fill out, and then it'll be me answering you, and we'll talk about like what custom shape you're looking for. We're talking to some companies about making like custom shaped logos too, which I think is exciting. Yeah, we could make you a custom charging station.
And that's also something if you have a car, you could like stick on your window.
Totally.
On the top. Well, I mean, you probably not on the front window.
What? No.
On the side windows, yeah. I mean, even if people wanted to just fill out an entire window they have at home, which is a full grid, and you could do that quite easily. I mean, I think it's. I think the version that it's at right now is great, and I can see it certainly fitting within a lot of people aesthetically. But what? You inhaled again.
No,
but the flexibility, I think, it's so promising.
Well, and I think it's super inspiring for us too as architects, because solar panel, like we totally get your point when you're like, people are not interested in like, having chit chat about solar panels because the way they look, and because it's something that's been around for quite a while, and it feels like it hasn't ever evolved in any way, right?
Yeah.
So your project is super inspiring for us as designers and for potential consumers, because it just shows them that we can do more than what has been done. And I think that's just key.
Well, it's the accessibility aspect too, right? I think
not just sustainability and data. Like it could be much more than just that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you had mentioned the importance of design and the aesthetics, and there's also, of course, the financial accessibility. Like I don't have to invest in to have some guys come to my house and pay for labor to have them install something that I don't know how it works exactly. I'm going to assume it's going to cost thousands of dollars at a minimum.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to charge a phone. Everyone needs to charge a phone.
Well, and that's a good point, right? Depending on your class and your income, like you can have access to some kind of sustainability by buying this product.
Is there a sense of? I know we're coming up on the marker. Is there a sense of like how much? How do I phrase this? Like a cost and then return in terms of buying the product and then energy that you're getting to store?
Yeah. This is actually a tricky question because electricity is so cheap. It's really cheap. Like, I think Andy and I's electricity for the month in our apartment is like $30. It's really, really affordable, at least where we are.
You guys either are living in the dark or you have 50 of those panels set up somewhere.
Probably a little of both. But like, it would be, honestly, I think it would be, I did this calculation, like 8 to 10 years or something. Like it's a long time. And it's honestly something that is frustrating in the solar space too, because even on residential rooftop, like you can spend like 15 grand on a rooftop solar and it'll take you like 10 to 15 years to really break even on your money, and then your electricity starts being free. So then you start making money essentially. It's tough, like because this will be me like on my soapbox being crotchety, but because of the way that the grid was set up to basically work with fossil fuel production and subsidize the production of that, like electricity is so cheap. So to be honest, like if you live in a state where like New Jersey actually has a lot of great legislation. California is one of the best states to go solar because the local governments can provide subsidies and grants and like incentives to make people do it. Because if you just do it without that, it's the finances like don't really make sense.
Yeah. Sure. But so you're saying that actually the power grid, the electrical side of it is subsidized and that's why it's cheap.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many incentives and breaks for big like coal and oil companies to like sell the cheapest product and like make the most money. It's actually a really interesting time right now because I think for the first time the price of oil is like is not like the demand is so low because people aren't driving and flying and like using as much. And now they don't know what to do with it. And now I feel like that's actually the perfect paradigm for renewable energy to really surge because then it's not just about the finances. It's just like about demand. And what's interesting about that is like with solar or wind, you're basically making the energy in like real time. And it doesn't have to be like transported or mined or anything like that. Where if you live in a house with solar panels, that energy is getting used immediately, where what's happening, the issue with oil right now is like you have to produce oil, right? You have to like drill it and process it and make it. And then after you make it, people have to use it. But if you make too much, then nobody needs it. It's like it's a whole process. And that process doesn't exist as much with renewables.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. That could be a whole other podcast, like energy production.
Well, we'll have you back on. We'll just have you back on in a few weeks. But this has been super fascinating to hear the story and hear about the products. And again, the website is Grouphug. You said no one said Grubhub, but in my mind I was thinking Grubhub because I'm hungry. Grouphugtech.com. The product is super cool, and we look forward to hearing about it in the future and seeing it. And I mean, we'll have you on again to talk about these other big issues, or maybe like a year down the line when you're massively successful and
when you're going on vacation with Mark Cuban.
With Andy. Andy is
and there. Andy, of course.
And Andy, yes.
He's like,
Andy's giving me looks. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. It's been fun.
Cheers, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye. Thanks everyone for listening to this week's episode of the Midnight Charette, and thanks to our guest Krystal. An enjoyable time and good to see them on camera. Well, you didn't see Andy, but we saw Andy. Support them obviously by going to grouphugtech.com and ordering their products or checking them out, or just sending them some kind words via Instagram, the gram. And you could also support our show by reaching out to us via all the social medias or leaving a review of our show on iTunes or the podcast app. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube.
We also have a hotline. If you have any questions, any stories, any tips you want to share with us, or you need input from us, feel free to reach out. The number is 213-222-6950. You can either send a text message or call and leave a voicemail. It goes directly to voicemail. And based on that, we will try and respond to you as soon as possible, or even make an episode about the question that you sent us.
Absolutely. Thanks again for listening. It means a lot to us, and stay tuned for more. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.